We have looked at several different cartoons from streaming services before on this series, but I'm surprised it has taken us this long to look at a show from Netflix. That's right, nearly 30 episodes into the search for the worst cartoon, and somehow we have yet to look at a single Netflix cartoon. We've looked at cartoons from other streaming services, but not Netflix. Now, I am very much aware of a certain Netflix cartoon that I'm sure a lot of people are waiting to see me cover on this series, a show that stands as possibly their longest running animated series and one of the longest running Netflix originals in general, a show that came out in 2017 and has gotten a bad reputation since then, despite also simultaneously receiving critical acclaim somehow. Yeah, you know exactly which show I'm talking about. And as much as I would love, or actually no, I don't think I would love to do this at all, as much as I would love to sit down and watch this show and make a video on it, it's not the right time yet. It's simple as that. Which is why instead, we're going to be looking at Hoops, a short-lived Netflix series that only lasted 10 episodes. This show came out in August of 2020, received negative reviews when it came out, and was cancelled after one season in December of that same year. It's worth noting as well that in addition to this being a Netflix original series, it's also from 20th Century Fox. And considering the quality of some of their other shows that we've looked at on this series, I knew that I was in for a treat. The first thing you will notice about Hoops is that it has a very familiar looking art style. It resembles a certain cartoon that you need to have a high IQ in order to understand. I am of course talking about the one, the only Rick and Morty. Now, I've frequently mentioned before in this series that there are many bad adult cartoons out there that rip off Family Guy's art style. We've actually looked at one cartoon on this series that's ripped off Family Guy's art style, and there are tons of other shows, including one that came out very recently that rip off Family Guy's art style for some reason. But I've never seen a bad adult cartoon that rips off Rick and Morty's art style, so you know what? It's a nice change of pace, a breath of fresh air if you will. Admittedly, off-brand Rick and Morty isn't as ugly of an art style as off-brand Family Guy, so at least this show has that going for it. So, what is there for me to say about Hoops? Well, let's see. It's an adult cartoon. A bad one at that. There's no denying that at all. I was very surprised to see that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were involved with this show. I mean, they didn't create the show or anything like that, but they still played a big part in the production for it, so it's just really surprising to see their names attached to something like this, given the quality of most of their output. I think it's safe to say that overworking the animators on Across the Spider-Verse is now officially the second worst thing that Lord and Miller have done. Actually, admittedly, Hoops isn't the worst adult cartoon I've seen on this series. I don't know if this show is legitimately less bad than most of the other adult cartoons that I've covered on this series, or if I'm just suffering severe brain rot just sitting through all of this adult cartoon slop that I look at this and I think, whatever, it's not that bad, I guess, when in reality it probably is as bad as a lot of the other cartoons that I've looked at. For what it's worth, there are a couple moments in Hoops that are funny. There are moments where I laughed watching the show. Actually, I would go as far as to say that there are more funny moments in this show than I initially expected. I went into this thinking that this would be a show completely devoid of humor, and what I end up getting instead is a show that's only 95% devoid of humor. Most of the humor in this show just consists of the characters swearing, and that's it, saying the F word a million times. Nothing more, nothing less. The bare minimum for comedy in an adult cartoon. Legit, the show starts off in a basketball game where serious protagonist, Ben Hopkins, abruptly stops the game to complain about how it's not fair that the team members on the rival team have the advantage of being taller than the team members on his team. I rewatched that scene for this video, and I kid you not, there are 14 swear words in it. 14 swear words. Just watching this whole scene, I just thought to myself, oh god, I have to sit through 10 entire episodes of this garbage, don't I? You see, I frequently clown on Has Been Hotel for thinking that excessive swearing is funny, but the truth is, there are a lot of bad adult cartoons that do this. There are other adult cartoons that I've looked at on this series that have this same problem, and there are tons of other adult cartoons that I've yet to look at on this series that have this problem as well. I don't know why people are okay with Has Been Hotel doing it, but they're not okay with these other shows doing it, but whatever. I'll save the Has Been Hotel slander for the inevitable Hell of a Boss episode, thank you very much. The Prince and the Slim Shady Show also suffer from this problem. They just think swearing a million times is funny. Saying f over and over and over again is funny. That's comedy gold. And it is never funny at all. It just comes off as a desperate way to make your show feel more adult. Again, it's the bare minimum of comedy in an adult cartoon. I mean, as we all know, animation is just a dumb, stupid thing for babies who have no taste. When it comes to cartoons made for big boys like me, there has to be strong language, because that's the only way to convey that yes, indeed, a cartoon is for an adult and not for some stupid little baby. There are many different ways for Hoops to convey that it is an adult cartoon and it's not a cartoon for kids, but instead it just goes the lazy route and just has the characters swear a lot, because how else are they supposed to convey that this is a show for big boys like me and it's not some little baby SpongeBob crap or anything like that. Yeah, you never see SpongeBob say the F word or the B word or anything like that. That's because SpongeBob is a stupid cartoon for idiot babies that have no taste. I only watch big boy cartoons like Has Been Hotel. You see, it's funny because they say the F word a lot and they say the B word a lot, and that's funny because it's a cartoon for big boys like me. There's no other way to convey that Has Been Hotel is a cartoon for adults and that it's not for kids at all. Excessive swearing is the only way. In addition to the excessive swearing, there's also this really weird running gag where Ben is obsessed with this random early 90s movie called Little Man Tate. I've never heard of this movie. Chances are you've never heard of it either. But in like half of the episodes of this show, it's brought up at least once. I mean, I guess you could say that the joke comes from the fact that Ben is extremely obsessed with this random obscure early 90s movie. The running gag is unfunny regardless, but I guess it would be even unfunnier if Ben was obsessed with a famous 90s movie like Forrest Gump or whatever. I don't know, it's just a really unfunny joke. It happens so frequently in the show, and not once is it ever funny. So the show follows Ben Hopkins, a high school basketball coach with anger issues, as he tries to make it big within the world of basketball coaching. His team has a lot of members in it. A lot of them are nerdy, dorky kids. I'm not going to go into detail about any of the team members. The only one that's really important to this show is Maddie, because there are several episodes that are focused on him, and that includes the aforementioned first episode, which mostly consists of Ben trying to get Maddie onto his team due to the fact that Maddie is 7 feet tall, which would then increase the chances of Ben's team winning in future basketball games. One of the ways that Ben tries to convince Maddie to join his team is by getting him together with a hooker, and a friendly reminder that Maddie is supposed to be a minor, so Yeah, that's not a very good way to start off your show. I'm honestly kind of glad that this is one of those shows where it's like they just dropped every episode all at once instead of having it be like one episode a week. Because if this show followed the one episode per week pattern, that would just make this first episode even worse than it already is. By the end of the episode, Maddie ends up joining Ben's team, and so he becomes a prominent character in later episodes, with several other episodes also being focused on him. This show is a little bit of a roller coaster when it comes to its episode quality. As I mentioned before, there are 10 episodes of this show, and I sat through all 10 episodes. The first 2 episodes are dog shit, pure dog shit. They are just not funny at all. I think the first episode of the show is probably the worst one, if I were to be honest. The second episode isn't as bad, I guess, but it's still just really unfunny. And then the third episode is still not good, but it's also a little bit better than the first 2 episodes, and it does have a few funny moments in it. It's another Maddie-centric episode. A teacher assigns Maddie a test, and if he fails the test, he can't play in Ben's team anymore. Most of the episode is just Ben trying to bribe the teacher into letting Maddie pass, regardless of how he actually does on the test. Most of the episode is unfunny, but surprisingly, there's a subplot in it that's semi-funny to me. I don't know why, it just kind of is. Ben is watching The Godfather, and he's watching a scene where a dead horse, a literal dead horse, is in someone's bed, which I've never actually seen The Godfather, but I guess now I know that's a thing that happens in it. Great, I just got The Godfather spoiled for me by Hoops. That's lovely. Although I will say, if this scene actually is in The Godfather, then now I finally understand why it's considered one of the greatest movies ever made. Peter Griffin was wrong. Taking inspiration from The Godfather, Ben and his team try to get a literal dead horse into the teacher's bed. However, they are unable to transport the horse as it is far too heavy. Now, I don't know if my sense of humor is completely broken at this point, but I found this scene to be kind of funny actually. I guess it's just absurd enough for me to find it just a little bit amusing. After the horse plan fails though, Ben decides to go with a much more up plan instead. I'm not sure if I can go into any detail on what the plan is, but I will say it does hinder whatever enjoyment I got out of the horse subplot. Maddie speaks up to Ben, believing that his plan isn't a good idea at all and that it's not worth it. And as it turns out, that was part of the test. Maddie telling Ben that this isn't the right thing to do, it's not worth it, he'll take the test normally. It's not a great episode, but you know what, at least I got a little bit of enjoyment out of the horse subplot, so you know what, I'll give it that. And then we move on to the 4th episode, which, dare I say it, is actually surprisingly decent, kinda. In the episode, Ben's team receives a sponsorship, and at first Ben is excited about this, only to then learn that the sponsor is his dad's steakhouse. Ben doesn't have a very good relationship with his dad, Barry Hopkins, who I guess was a former basketball player who later went on to open his own steakhouse. I think in one episode it stated that Barry wanted Ben to work at his steakhouse with him, but Ben wanted to focus on coaching instead. I'm not sure. Midway into the game, as Ben's team is clearly losing, Barry promises that everyone attending the game would get free steaks at his steakhouse if Ben's team wins the game. As Barry is certain that Ben's team will not win the game, and so he won't have to give all of the people attending the game free steaks, as there are a lot of people that are watching the game, which further pisses Ben off. Later into the episode, Ben vents out to his team that he hates his dad and he wants to be more successful than him and stuff like that. And as it turns out, the team members all hate their dads for various reasons. Ben's team goes back out into the game, imagining that the rival team members are their dads, which pisses them off and makes them better at the game. And then at the end of the episode, much to Barry's surprise, Ben's team ends up winning the game and everyone gets free steaks. I don't know what it is about this episode, but it was surprisingly kind of enjoyable. It's the only decent episode of the show, I would say. The few rare funny moments that are in this show, they mostly come from this episode. So, I gotta give it to this show. There aren't that many bad adult cartoons that I've looked at on this series that have like a standout really good episode or anything like that. The remaining 6 episodes of the show are all just consistently bleh. There are a couple funny moments scattered throughout these next few episodes, but they are few and far between. There's also a couple offensively bad moments in these episodes, but again, they are few and far between, so yeah, I'll take it, I don't care. The biggest crime that these next few episodes commit is that they're just unfunny, but I'm not offended by them or anything like that. This isn't like The Prince or Fairview or anything like that where it's like, oh my god, it's like the worst thing I've ever seen and it's insufferable. This is surprisingly tolerable for bad adult cartoon standards. Besides the first 2 episodes, the rest of the show is just... It's bad, but like it's not god-awful or anything like that. I could sit through it. The fact that it does have a couple funny moments in it automatically makes it leagues better than a lot of the bad adult cartoons that I've looked at on this series. I'll tell you that much. At the same time though, I can definitely see why this show didn't last very long. This was a show that was never going to last long. It was never going to get any sort of critical acclaim or anything like that. Ignoring the fact that the show is bad, I just cannot imagine an alternate universe where Hoops is this beloved, long-running, critically acclaimed cartoon or anything like that. I cannot imagine this show having any sort of longevity or lasting impact or anything like that. This is a show that was destined to become short-lived and forgotten about, and lo and behold, it ended up becoming short-lived and forgotten about. It's not The Simpsons, it's not Family Guy, it's not South Park, it's not Rick and Morty, similar art styles notwithstanding. It's just Hoops, and that's it. That's all that it is, and that's all that it will ever be. Nothing more, nothing less. With that said, I do want to briefly go over the final episode of the show, because funnily enough, it kind of feels like an unintentional serious finale. Now, on very rare occasions, we've looked at cartoons that actually do have proper serious finales, but then this is an interesting case where it's like, this final episode wasn't supposed to be a serious finale, but it feels like one in a way. The final episode is yet another Maddie-centric episode. In the episode, Maddie is given an offer to play basketball in a different school, a more fancy prep school. Ben is initially against the offer and tries to sabotage it as hard as he can until he receives a similar offer where he could go with Maddie to coach him, in which Ben then agrees to go with Maddie to the school. As a parting gift to the other team members, Ben decides to give them a bunch of random crap that he finds in his car, including a spare tire. The two of them get a flat tire, and as Ben goes to the trunk to get a spare tire, he realizes that he gave the spare tire to one of his team members. The episode, and the series as a whole, ends with Ben going on a lengthy rant about this, and there's a Little Man Tate reference thrown in, because why the hell not? Of course there has to be a reference to Little Man Tate. And then the show finally ends, never to receive a season 2. I'm not even gonna lie, looking at this show made me think a lot about the short-lived one-season cartoons that I've looked at on this series. It makes me look at stuff like The Prince, High Guardian Spice, whatever, and it makes me think, like, what if? What if they got a season 2? I mean, I don't want them to get a season 2. I'm glad that they never got a season 2, but that morbid curiosity inside me just can't help but wonder, What if it got a season 2? What if all of the unresolved cliffhangers in the first season were resolved in the second season? I think I brought that up when I reviewed The Prince, that there were several subplots in The Prince and they're never going to be resolved because the show got cancelled. As I mentioned before, The Prince literally ends with a cliffhanger that will never be resolved no matter what. And Hoops is in a very similar situation. Do they get to the prep school or not? And then what happens? Will season 2 have a completely new set of characters besides Ben and Maddie? It's such a weird feeling watching these short-lived one-season cartoons, because it's like you get to know all of the characters, you get to learn, what's going on in the storyline, and then you get to the final episode and it's just, that's it. There's no more of that show. It's gone. It's over. Even if these are bad shows, I can't help but just, get that feeling. I know we all like to criticize the fact that Velma got a season 2, but if I were to be honest, if Velma got canceled after one season, I would just be left wondering, what if? What if we got a season 2? I'm not even ashamed to say that. I don't care. Whatever the case may be, Hoops would eventually get cancelled in December of 2020, and then it would never be heard from ever again. As I mentioned before, this is a show that was never going to have any sort of longevity or anything like that. This was a show that was destined to become short-lived and forgotten about. Even if the show was good, I just don't see it being this massively successful, beloved adult cartoon. It would probably last one more season and then it would get cancelled, most likely. And that's the story of Hoops, a Netflix cartoon that died almost immediately after it was born. As far as bad adult cartoons go, Hoops is one of the better ones that I've seen on this series. The fact that this show was able to get a couple laughs out of me on rare occasions automatically makes it better than a large majority of the adult cartoons covered on this series, so I can give it credit for that. This is one of the higher ranking adult cartoons that I've looked at in this series, and it's still in the middle tier of the ranking list. That should just tell you how bad some of these shows are. I think The Nut Shack, Alan Gregory, and Control Alt Delete are the only adult cartoons that are ranked higher than Hoops, and that's it. I'm not sure if Slippin' Jimmy counts as an adult cartoon. I mean, obviously the original Better Call Saul is not a cartoon, nor is it for kids, but Slippin' Jimmy feels a lot more kid-friendly in comparison. On the one hand, it would make no sense for them to make a kids cartoon based on Better Call Saul of all things, but on the other hand, there's nothing in Slippin' Jimmy to indicate that it's a cartoon for adults, besides the fact that it's based on Better Call Saul. I don't know. This makes me question who is the target audience for Slippin' Jimmy, besides people with good taste in cartoons, of course. Whatever the case may be, there are far more adult cartoons ranked below Hoops when compared to adult cartoons ranked above Hoops. Stuff like Velma, Slim Shady Show, Has Been Hotel, they're much worse than Hoops, I don't care. Some of you might be wondering why I'm considering Hoops to be significantly better than Has Been Hotel, despite criticizing both shows earlier for relying on excessive swearing for humor. Well, you see, here's the difference. Number one, there is no one that will try to convince me that Hoops is actually a good show and that I'm wrong, whereas people, they have done that for Has Been Hotel. I just know it. They have and they will try their hardest to convince me that I'm wrong about Has Been Hotel. Number two, as mentioned before, there are a few rare funny moments in Hoops. I laughed a couple of times watching Hoops. I don't think I ever laughed once watching Has Been Hotel. So yes, even though both shows rely on excessive swearing to be funny, and neither one is funny because of that, there are a couple funny moments in Hoops when compared to Has Been Hotel. Therefore, Hoops is the better cartoon. Sorry, not sorry. It honestly felt weirdly refreshing to have an adult cartoon that was kind of tolerable in a way. The first two episodes really made me think that this would be the worst piece of shit I've ever seen in my life, and it ended up being not as bad as I expected. It's still a bad show, but for Search for the Worst Cartoon Standards, for bad adult cartoon standards, this is a great show, honestly. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.